Ceci est le circuit son international par satellite en provenance de Cape Kennedy à
This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control, T-minus 18 minutes, 40 seconds and counting. Countdown still proceeding at this time. Although it is touch and go at this time, we are still not below our minimum margins for launch. The countdown proceeding, as reported earlier, we do plan to count down to the 10-minute mark unless we get information prior to that time that would show us we could not go. The spacecraft commander, Pete Conrad, still appears to be very cheerful in the spacecraft as he reports back on the settings, the final settings of the stabilization and control system switches. These are the switch panels concerned with the propulsion system that is used in orbit and, of course, on the way to the moon for spacecraft maneuvers once the Saturn V launch vehicle has placed the spacecraft on its proper trajectory. We are conditioning the tanks of the third stage of the Saturn V launch vehicle with some super cold helium to prepare it for engine ignition, which of course would occur during the powered phase of flight. Since that liquid hydrogen fuel must be maintained at 423 degrees below zero, we want to introduce a cold atmosphere to the tank itself and the engine chamber so that that ignition will be proper when it occurs during the powered flight. Although we are looking a little bad outside here at the present time, our countdown is still proceeding. We're giving reports to the astronauts on our status. They are performing their normal functions at this time as the countdown continues. Coming up in several minutes, the spacecraft will go on full internal power with the fuel cells. We're now coming up on the 17-minute mark. Mark, T-minus 17 minutes and counting on Apollo 12. This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control, T-minus 14 minutes, 16 seconds, and counting. We are go on Apollo 12. We are aiming toward our planned liftoff at 11:22 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The countdown will continue. Our latest weather advisories are such that conditions are predicted to be acceptable for a launch attempt at 11:22 a.m. Although we do have rain in the area, our minimums are acceptable. The top of this weather front is at about 23,000 feet, and we have confirmation of very low turbulence concerned with this front. All of these matters related with many other determinations concerned with our mission rules. The launch director, Walt Caprian, has given a go to continue the count. The astronauts have been given this word. They're busy in the spacecraft at this time because the spacecraft has just gone on full internal power with the fuel cells. Up to this time, we had been sharing the load of the power of the spacecraft with an external power source. The astronauts also are making their final readouts on the stabilization and control system with Pete Conrad reporting back to the spacecraft test conductor, Skip Chauvin. The astronauts will arm their rotational hand controllers, those hand controllers that are used to perform the various maneuvers in space as the countdown continues. We'll be coming up shortly with some commands, signals from Mission Control in Houston to assure that Houston will be able to send proper commands to the spacecraft once we have liftoff. Our countdown is proceeding, 12 minutes, 42 seconds, and counting. This is Kennedy Launch Control.
Feed it to me underneath the front here. It's plug, you want the small you have. Yeah, throw it over the back. See it right here. All right, go. How do you like children? Oh, great. Okay, you wanted to be a big-time cameraman, huh? Great chance,
This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control. We've just passed the 9-minute mark in our countdown. T-minus 8 minutes, 54 seconds, and counting. Right at this point, astronaut Tom Stafford here in the firing room is talking with Pete Conrad, bringing him up to date on the weather conditions. The weather conditions as reported on the last announcement. That is, we have a top of this weather front of about 23,000 feet. Very low turbulence associated with it. Pete Conrad has just reported back. Sounds good to him. Our count still proceeding at this time as Pete Conrad reports back to Tom Stafford. At this point also, Alan Bean, the lunar module pilot in the right-hand seat, has given some up-to-date readouts on the status of our fuel cells, the power system for the spacecraft, and they've been recorded by the spacecraft checkout personnel. We've taken a look at the lunar module for about 20 minutes. We powered it up at the T-minus 30-minute mark in the count, powered up all systems with the 4 batteries in the descent stage and the 2 batteries in the ascent stage. The lunar module, of course, which will have the call sign Intrepid when it separates from the command module in flight. Intrepid is go at this time, and we're now powering down the instrumentation. Spacecraft test conductor Skip Chauvin now performing his status checks with the personnel in the spacecraft control room. All report go at this time. The spacecraft ready light should be coming up shortly. We are still go at this time, 7 minutes, 30 seconds, and counting. This is Kennedy Launch Control. This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control, T-minus 6 minutes, 30 seconds, and counting. We're still proceeding satisfactorily with our countdown at this time. The emergency detection system that can warn the astronauts of difficulties during the powered flight now has gone on its automatic sequence. We have power on with the EDS as the countdown continues. The spacecraft ready light is on. The EDS light is on, meaning the emergency detection system also is go as the countdown continues. The astronauts now standing by in the spacecraft. Coming up shortly will be some status checks here in the firing room. This is Kennedy Launch Control. Still go with Apollo 12 at 5 minutes, 52 seconds, and counting. This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control, T-minus 5 minutes and counting. T-minus 5, that swing arm, number 9, it will now be coming back to its fully retracted position at the pad. Mark, the swing arm now moving back from the spacecraft as planned at the 5-minute mark in the count. Just before coming up on the swing arm removal, we went through our final status checks and received a loud and strong go from the mission director, Chet Lee, launch operations manager, Paul Donnelly, and launch director, Walt Caprian, responding to the requests from the test supervisor. The lights now will be coming on the abort panels of astronaut Pete Conrad. These are his cue lights for the 5 engines in the first. Spacecraft test conductor Skip Chauvin has said, have a good trip, Pete. Pete reported back, we appreciate everything everyone has done. 4 minutes and counting, still proceeding at this time. We'll be coming up on our automatic sequence at 3 minutes and 10 seconds in the countdown. We're going through our final Astro launch checks at this time as the countdown continues. During these checks just now, the launch operations manager, Paul Donnelly, said to Pete Conrad, the launch team wishes you good luck. May the wind be always behind you. Pete Conrad said, thank you very much. Count still continuing. Final checks of the guidance and navigation system going on now. Pete Conrad reporting back on their status. We'll be coming up on the automatic sequence in about 10 seconds. From that time on down, we're completely automatic, leading up to 8.9, the 8.9 second mark in the count when we get the ignition sequence. Mark, firing command. Launch sequence start. We have the firing command. We're on automatic sequence. T-minus 3 minutes and counting. T-minus 3. Once the automatic sequence began, we begin pressurizing those big fuel and oxidizer tanks. This will lead us up to 8.9 seconds when the engine ignition sequence begins. The 5 engines in the first stage will ignite, building up 7.6 million pounds thrust total. This should occur at the 0 mark in the count. We will get verification through the computer that we have proper thrust. The hold-down arms will release and we'll be off with Apollo 12. 2 minutes, 20 seconds, and counting at this time. 2 minutes, 10 seconds at this time. We see that the stages are now beginning to pressurize as our countdown proceeds. Coming up on the 2-minute mark in the count. T-minus 2 minutes and counting. T-minus 2. Spacecraft commander now has placed the environmental control system of the spacecraft on internal. Up to this time, we've been providing external sources for the environmental control system. We're checking the hydraulics of the first stage of the launch vehicle now. We are still go. 1 minute, 40 seconds, and counting at this time. T-minus 90 seconds and counting. T-minus 90, still go. Our status board here in firing room 2 indicates all is still well with the countdown. Third stage tanks now pressurized as the automatic sequence continues. 1 minute, 15 seconds and counting. Astronaut Alan Bean has just brought the entry batteries on the main power source in the spacecraft. We've conserved those batteries up to this time. We're coming up on 60 seconds. Mark, T-minus 60 seconds and counting. T-minus 60. Alan Bean running up the volume on his VHF. 50 seconds and counting. 50. We've now gone internal power with the launch vehicle. We're on the internal batteries in the 3 stages of the Saturn V. T-minus 40 seconds and counting. The spacecraft commander now performing his final function, pressing a button to align the guidance and control system of the spacecraft. Coming up on 30. Mark, T-minus 30 seconds and counting. T-minus 30. 25 seconds and counting. We're still proceeding. T-minus 20. 17 seconds. Swing arm back. We have guidance internal. 10, 9, 8. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engines running. Commit. Liftoff. We have liftoff. 11:22 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Pete Conrad reports that your program is in. Tower clear. We...
A pitch and a roll program, and this baby is really going.
Pete. Pete Conrad reporting the roll and pitch program to put Apollo 12 on the proper course. Altitude at 1/2 mile.
Roll's complete.
Roger, Pete. Seconds.
Mark 1 Bravo. Roger,
Altitude 1.5 miles now. Velocity 1,592 feet per second.
platform, gang. I don't know what happened here. We had everything in the world drop out.
Roger.
+1.
Fuel cell lights and AC bus light. A fuel cell disconnect. AC bus overload 1 and 2. Main bus A and B out.
Apollo 12 Houston, try SCE to auxiliary, over.
NCE to auxiliary.
SCE to auxiliary.
ECOM reports the readings back.
Mark 1 Charlie.
1 Charlie.
Flight Director Jerry Griffin taking a staging status now. Apollo 12 downrange 17 miles. Altitude 20 miles.
Bridge, gang.
Apollo 12 Houston, try to reset your fuel cells now.
Inboard engine out on schedule. Altitude 33 miles, downrange 45 miles.
Got a good S2, gang.
Roger, we copy, Pete. You're looking good.
Good staging and good thrust on the second stage.
Right now, there are problems here. I don't know what happened. I'm not sure we can get hit by lightning.
Your thrust is looking good, Pete.
Okay, I have a good GDC, and Al has got the fuel cells back on, and we'll be working on our AC buses.
Right, Pete. Your fuel cells look good down here.
I think we need to do a little more all-weather testing.
Amen.
There goes the tower, gang. That's away clean. We look good.
Good show, Pete. You're in mode 2.
Launch escape tower has been jettisoned on schedule. And we confirm the engine skirt separation also. Downrange 122 miles, altitude 61 miles, velocity 10,000 feet per second.
We've got an ISS light on, and we've got a cycling CO2 partial pressure high, which I don't bother me particularly, and we have reset all the fuel cells. We have all the buses back on the line, and we'll just square up the platform when we get into orbit.
Roger, Pete. That sounds good.
Hey, that's one of the better sims, believe me.
We've had a couple of cardiac arrests down here, too, Pete.
There wasn't any time for that up here. But we've got a good clock running here, and correct me, I'm going to give you a mark at 4 plus 30. I've lost my event timer, and mark 4 plus 30.
Looks good, Pete.
Okay, we're all organized again, gang.
The only thing we've lost now is the ISS. Our number 1 ball is just drifting all over the place, and we'll have to catch it later.
Roger, Dick.
You might have the GNC guys think about how we're going to get that thing, because it's just drifting, it's floating.
Okay, we're thinking.
Trajectory is right down the lines on the plot board. Altitude is 85 miles now.
Houston, we won't be sending you an S4B to COI call.
Okay, understand, and can you give us some good words like, let's get the IMU calm down is rolling all over the place.
Okay, Pete, and if you do a mode 4, it'll be on the backup.
Yeah, no sweat. I got a good SCS.
Okay, good show.
I got a little vibration of some kind. She's chugging along here, minding her own business, though.
Okay, Pete.
Velocity is 13,500 feet per second now. Altitude 92 miles. Apollo 12 downrange 345 miles.
Roger, 12. Apollo 12 Houston, level sense arm, 8 plus 3, 7. Cutoff, 9er plus 1, 1.
Okay, here comes the gimbal motor.
The level sense arm initiates the staging sequence. That will be at 8 minutes, 37 seconds. We're at 6:25 now.
Mark S4B to orbit.
S4B to orbit.
The S4B now has the capability to put the Apollo 12 spacecraft into orbit should something happen to the second stage.
Apollo 12 Houston, you're right smack dab on the trajectory. Your IU's doing a beautiful job.
Okay, we're all chuckling up here over the lights. We all said there were so many on we couldn't read them.
Downrange 557 miles now.
12 Houston, give us Omni Delta.
Roger, going to Omni Delta.
Altitude 100 miles. Velocity 18,417 feet per second.
Center engine.
Center engine out on schedule.
Apollo 12 Houston, we can start getting that platform squared away. Go IMU power standby and then back to on. We'll get her caged up.
We'll wait till we get through staging here, I think, Houston.
Okay, as soon as you can reach it, that's the way to go. Apollo 12 Houston, go for staging.
Roger, we're go for staging. Okay, you want the LMP to turn off the GNN power and then bring it back on, and you want me to use my IMU cage switch, is that right?
Stand by on that, Pete.
Second stage engine shutdown is predicted for 9 minutes 11 seconds. We're at 9 minutes now.
Got a good S4B, nice smooth staging.
Roger, Pete, your thrust looks good.
Okay, give us some more words on the IMU now.
Velocity is 23,000 feet per second. Downrange 967 miles. Altitude 102 miles.
Stand by a minute, Pete. We're still talking.
Okay.
Good trajectory, good thrust.
Mark, mode 4.
Roger, mode 4.
Mode 4, Apollo 12 could get into orbit now using the service propulsion system. Downrange 1,156 miles. Velocity is 24,157 feet per second. Altitude 103 miles.
I'll tell you one thing, it's a first-class ride, Houston.
Kind of a rough start.
Yeah. I always like to start out behind the 8 ball and get ahead.
Estimating cutoff at 11 minutes 35 seconds.
11 plus 35.
11 plus 35, roger, roger. Shut down, 1 plus 33, Houston.
Roger, Pete.
Flight dynamics report it looks like a good orbit. Showing velocity 25,561 feet per second. Downrange 1,450 miles. Fido says we're go.
Apollo 12, Houston. Before you get down there to work on that switch, try pulling on panel 5, your IMU main A and main B breakers.
Okay, that did it. They're both out. Now what do you want us to do?
Your S4B safe now, stand by.
Okay.
You got a go orbit, you're looking good.
That's Capcom Jerry Carr talking to Pete Conrad. The backup crew commander, Dave Scott, is also at the Capcom console here.
This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control, T-minus 18 minutes, 40 seconds and counting. Countdown still proceeding at this time. Although it is touch and go at this time, we are still not below our minimum margins for launch. The countdown proceeding, as reported earlier, we do plan to count down to the 10-minute mark unless we get information prior to that time that would show us we could not go. The spacecraft commander, Pete Conrad, still appears to be very cheerful in the spacecraft as he reports back on the settings, the final settings of the stabilization and control system switches. These are the switch panels concerned with the propulsion system that is used in orbit and, of course, on the way to the moon for spacecraft maneuvers once the Saturn V launch vehicle has placed the spacecraft on its proper trajectory. We are conditioning the tanks of the third stage of the Saturn V launch vehicle with some super cold helium to prepare.
Ceci est le circuit son international par satellite en provenance de Cape Kennedy.
Prepare it for engine ignition, which of course would occur during the powered phase of flight. Since that liquid hydrogen fuel must be maintained at 423 degrees below zero, we want to introduce a cold atmosphere to the tank itself and the engine chamber so that that ignition will be proper when it occurs during the powered flight. Although we are looking a little bad outside here at the present time, our countdown is still proceeding. We're giving reports to the astronauts on our status. They are performing their normal functions at this time as the countdown continues. Coming up in several minutes, the spacecraft will go on full internal power with the fuel cells. We're now coming up on the 17-minute mark. Mark, T-minus 17 minutes and counting on Apollo 12.